Richard Boyd-Barrett.
I give to you.
Taoiseach, can you honestly say to workers, to pensioners, to people on low and average incomes, with a straight face, that the paltry set of measures that you announced last Thursday to deal with the catastrophic rise in the cost of living are adequate? Can you seriously suggest that that is the case? Average heating and energy costs are due to go up by about €800 a year. You're giving back people €200 a year. A little bit extra on the fuel allowance. Who's supposed to pay the rest, Taoiseach? For workers whose wages are increasing at maybe 1% for public sector workers, or for pensioners and social welfare recipients who got an extra fiver in the budget. Who is supposed to pay the rest? Or what about the rents in the measures? Absolutely nothing. Rents up 10% year on year according to Daft. Average rents now in Dublin for one bed, €1,500. Average for two bed, 2,000, right? So you'd need between 17,000 and 24,000 euro in income just to pay the rent, nothing to deal with the unaffordable situation in rents. And then you have the wider cost of living, cost of food and so on, up by at least 5.7%, probably more. Where are workers supposed to make up the difference? Can you honestly say it's enough? It's an insult. It's an absolute insult. And today, or yesterday, sorry, in an interview, you ruled out another possibility. I mean, we proposed last week rent controls, caps on energy prices, bring up wages. You're not willing to do any of those things to control the spiralling cost of living. And yesterday you said, we can't get rid of the universal social charge. It'd be too expensive to get rid of the universal social charge. Of course, that's not what Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were saying before the election in 2016, when Michael McGrath said, as part of the pre-election promises, the USC was going to be gone for everybody earning less than 80,000 within 5 years. Paudie Coffey, in a press release, who was junior minister at the time, the Fine Gael manifesto said we'll get rid of the we're going to get rid of the USC altogether. All that's gone now. Too expensive, apparently. So we can't give workers a break by getting rid of the USC. So my question is, do you honestly believe this is adequate? How are people supposed to make the unaffordable rents or make up the hundreds of euros extra in heating and energy costs if you rule out all of these things? And why is it, Taoiseach, that it's always all right for the workers to pay? They can afford it, but you say we can't afford to give them a break on the USC, we can't afford rent controls, we can't afford energy price hikes, even though the landlords, the energy companies and the corporations are making an absolute fortune. At the same time, workers are hammered with the cost of living.
Taoiseach, please.
We put 650 million in the budget to reduce USC and to reduce tax, which you opposed. Okay, you opposed it. And I'd also make the point here, you're against property tax. You're against carbon tax. You're against USC. You're meant to be left-wing. How are we going to fund the services? How are we going to invest in education, in health, in housing? How are we going to do that? You're far more populist than left-wing, Deputy, because you're one of the few left-wing groups in Europe that oppose all of those taxes and don't believe that we need to broaden our tax revenue base to support workers, to support people in low incomes, to support housing, health, education, childcare. We can't do it. $4.5 billion on USC. If you just simply abolish it, you won't have the resources to invest in childcare, to invest in education and health and so on. I genuinely put that to you. I just don't understand where you're going to generate the revenue base that will create those billions. And wages will rise in the next number of years. And the central bank is predicting that wage rises will outpace price increases over the next 3 years, despite the spike in inflation this year. That's the central bank's projection in respect of wages, and from the public service perspective, the Minister for Public Expenditure did arrive at an agreement with the public service unions last year in terms of a national pay agreement which allowed for increases, and we will maintain our engagement and contact with the unions in respect of that issue in terms of wages and wage increases, and also sectoral agreements and so on that are part of that broader agreement, and restoration of FMP hours and so forth. And the measures that we brought in last week were designed to help as many people as we possibly could. The cut to electricity of €200 is a significant enough help to people. It's not going to cover everything. We acknowledge that, because government cannot cover everything. We've had 2 years where government has invested to an unprecedented extent in our economy. Unprecedented, that government would underpin, rightly so in my view, we had to do it because of the pandemic, but it's not something that can go on forever. That we continue to fund every enterprise in the country through EWIS or CRIS forever. That was never what was on anyone's agenda. It was to get through the pandemic, keep companies viable, keep enterprises viable, keep jobs intact, so that when we come out of the pandemic, businesses can get back up and running, jobs can be retained, and that we can, and through pandemic unemployment payment, we wanted to enable people to get through the pandemic. But there certainly seems to be a view that government can be the bank of last resort for everything in the country, and it just simply cannot be. We need balance here. And this country has a significant state involvement in the economy. No question about that. Very significant. We have a very strong social protection system. We have, which is funded by taxation. You take away the revenue base, you undermine the raison d'etre of our social protection system, which is a strong one. It can be improved, we can target it more, and we will continue to do that in the next budget, as we did in the last budget, particularly for families, and particularly for those on low incomes.
Deputy Boyd-Barrett.
But you see, it seems the bank of the last resort is always the worker's pocket. That's the truth. Because what you're really saying is the workers can take it in the neck. And the elephant in the room in your argument is the incredible increase in the wealth and profits of the richest in our society. While workers are having their pockets looted with increased energy prices, with rents that are utterly stratospheric and totally unaffordable, and you didn't answer how we're supposed to workers pay these things, but you don't mention the fact that profits in the last decade have gone up by 172%. You don't mention that. You don't mention that we now have 9 billionaires in this country, according to an Oxfam report, who have between them €42 billion, and that has increased dramatically during the pandemic. That's the elephant in the room you never want to talk about. Some people are doing very well from the inflation crisis. The profiteering energy companies, the landlords whose rents have gone through, the income on rents have gone through the roof. You never talk about them, but it's okay for the workers to take it in the neck. It's okay for their pockets to be rifled to pay unaffordable bills, unaffordable rents, unaffordable food prices. Oh, they can manage it. It's always possible to loot their pockets, but it's never possible to put a bit of extra tax on those who could well afford it.
Thank you, Deputy.
No, Deputy, you're wrong. We're not talking about looting anyone in terms of workers or anything. 630 million package of income tax and universal social charge reductions were brought in the last budget. You opposed it. But that's what we did in the last budget. We brought that in. No, the other thing, the other point I would make is this, that in terms of the measures we took, that they benefit workers. Cutting electricity bills by €200 benefits workers. Okay, the 125 lump sum for free fuel helps those on very low incomes. The drug payment threshold coming down to €80 benefits workers, particularly workers and families that would have high medical bills. Capping school transport charges helps workers. And those are measures that we took. The 20% reduction in public transport fares helps workers, particularly people getting on the bus or getting on the train to work. It helps them if we can reduce their everyday expenses. It won't deal with the entirety of it, I accept that, because this is a worldwide phenomenon that we've got to deal with and get through. But equally, I would say to you this, the economic model that you want to create, which is your legitimate aspiration, I think would destroy the economic model that I think overall has served, well actually it would work far better than the model you're proposing. Investment would flee the country, there's no question about that. No, well, actually, there's full employment almost at the moment. There's nearly 2.5 million
Taoiseach,
people working
time
in
is
this
up.
country. That is workers who are working. Because of a model over the last 50 years that has involved foreign direct
Time is
investment
up
coming into
now,
the country, which
please.
you oppose deep down. You have no time for it. You have no time for it.
Time is
And it
up.
applies thousands and thousands of people. And you tell me you're on the side of workers? You want to destroy the economic model to get elected. And you lose every mechanism to do that. That's the raison d'etre of how you operate. That's fair
Thank you,
enough
Taoiseach. We're
in one
way over
sense, but
time.
people need to know it.
Please, please.